Now I'm pleased to introduce Oregon's other U.S. Senator, Jeff Merkley. Jeff has been a friend of the Oregon Business Plan since he joined the Leadership Council as State Speaker in 2006. As Speaker, he worked with us to bolster Oregon's Rainy Day Fund. And as our new senator, he's become a champion for economic development, initiatives ranging from science and technology education to support for our burgeoning electric vehicle industry to a collaborative effort to address the complex challenges in the Klamath Basin. And the part I like best is he's a fellow Hatfield alum, something I'm proud to have in common with the senator. So, Senator, please. By the way, I don't know whether you drive a Volvo or not, but this won't fit, so I'm taking it away. Thank you.
Pat, thank you very much for the introduction. And indeed, when I first saw that ring on the television screen, I wondered, what is that sitting next to the podium, and how's he going to use that? But to find out it's another innovative product from Oregon, very cool. And I do want to pause for a moment and just say thank you to our senior senator, Ron Wyden. You could tell by the multitudinous topics that he was addressing how deeply engaged he has been. I couldn't ask for a better partner and a better mentor as a junior senator. So let's thank Ron again for the work he's doing. You know, the Oregon Business Council has proceeded to do a terrific job organizing this in partnership with so many other groups. And I think that the structure of the 4 Ps, people, places, pioneering innovation, productivity, has helped keep everyone thinking about how to take Oregon forward. And indeed, because the conversation is so critical, many state representatives, state senators come here to hear these thoughts and start thinking about how they can help implement this agenda, because when it's here in meeting rooms, it's theory. When it's on the floor of the Oregon House and Oregon Senate, it's implementation. And so I just wonder if all of our state representatives and state senators can stand up so we can express to them how important it is and valuable that they've come today. If they can all stand up. Well, so we're in the middle of an economic storm the size of which we have not seen since the Great Depression. And it's a pretty tough, long haul. In this situation, right now, there are some major risk factors, and one is the economy in Europe. I had a meeting with some of the experts from the bond rating companies here about 6 weeks ago, and the key question was, how much do we understand how the dominoes are lined up in terms of Greek debt, Italian debt, Spanish debt, Portuguese debt, even possibly French debt, and in terms of the contracts to insure those bonds, that is, the credit default swaps, or also known as derivatives. And the first expert says, well, there might be someone in my company who knows a little bit about that, but I don't. And the next 2 experts representing the other 2 companies said the same thing, that they did not have a handle on how this is interconnected. And that goes to the point of trying to restructure our national and international financial facilities in a fashion in which major systemic risk factors are addressed. And one of those is taking derivatives and having a market where they are traded, having the clarity of transaction for both sides of the deal, having a clearinghouse so that they do not pose major risk, making sure that there is regulatory oversight of these insurance policies or derivatives for securities, and extending and working with that framework throughout the European world, because our economy does not stand alone. And one of the biggest factors in our systemic risk right now is the fact of the lack of the infrastructure in the financial markets in Europe that could haunt us over this coming year and coming couple of years. So a big risk right now. And related to that, was a key issue of making sure that credit is available to our small businesses and to our families and to our large businesses. And that means that we have to get hedge fund activities in hedge funds and not have the subsidized taxpayer lending system be diverted into high-risk investments, but instead be powering up our Main Street banks for Main Street small businesses across our state and across this nation. We also have a pending tsunami of foreclosures. And these foreclosures are haunting us because they drive down the value of housing. They therefore stymie the production of new housing. They have put millions of families at risk. And we need to be much more aggressive in assisting families. We need to spend at least the resources and the energy and the passion that we had for rescuing major financial institutions. We need to do that for America's families and for the construction housing industry across this country. So it represents a key thing here for Oregon, because not only are our sawmills dependent upon housing to be revived, but also our grass seed industry, also our nursery stock industry, and indeed the confidence of citizens to be able to spend the dollars that they do have depends upon this recovery. It was housing that brought us into this mess, and housing is going to be a key factor in getting us out. So in this economic storm, we are not hopelessly adrift. We have to instead say that we are going to both steer our ship and we are going to power our ship through this storm. And as we wrestle with that, a key piece is how we address the national debt or the annual deficits, and they are substantial. The key is that as we wrestle with this, we have to realize there is a huge difference between reducing a deficit in a fashion that destroys jobs and reducing the deficit in a fashion that creates jobs. And this is why, with the super committee, I called for every proposal to be evaluated by whether, yes, it reduces the deficit by this amount, but does it do so in a fashion that creates jobs, or does it wipe out jobs? Because if we destroy more jobs in terms of the tools we select for reducing the deficit, then we will drive this economy deeper into the ditch, and it'll be a much further time getting out. We need to take and bring job creation viewpoint to every single proposal that is put forward. Now, CBO estimates that if we were at 5% unemployment, just that alone would reduce the amount of the annual deficit by a third, or by 33%. So it's a huge impact. Now let me turn to energy. Now I'm struck, Senator Dorgan from North Dakota is now retired, but he liked to take to the floor, and as a new senator, you are asked to preside a lot because you basically spend a lot of time on the floor, so other senators who have been there longer can be doing other things. But the advantage is you get to hear lots and lots of viewpoints about what's going on across America while you're presiding. And Senator Dorgan would come to the floor and he'd talk about North Dakota as the Saudi Arabia of wind power. And then Harry Reid would come to the floor and he would talk about Nevada, and he'd say, Nevada is the Saudi Arabia of solar power. And here in Oregon, we have a great deal of biomass potential, and we have a couple county commissioners down in Douglas County who have pointed out that Douglas County can be the Saudi Arabia of biomass energy. So I ask you, with all these Saudi Arabias in America, how come we're still importing oil from Saudi Arabia? We spend $1 billion a day on imported oil. And if you want to create wealth and jobs overseas, that's a great plan. But if you want to create wealth and jobs here in America, then we need to replace that imported oil with red, white, and blue American-made energy. And Oregon has huge potential on this. We have solar power, we have wind power, we have geothermal project under construction in eastern Oregon. We have an experimental buoy that is going to go down the Columbia River and be installed for wave power. And by all estimates, Oregon has some of the best waves for wave energy of any place on this planet. We have all of this potential. We have the biomass potential. So Oregon can be at the lead in this area. And not only does it mean a lot of jobs and a lot of innovation and a lot of exports for our state, but it also means a stronger economy overall. Indeed, it improves our national security to be able to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. It certainly does right by our economy. And in addition, it puts Oregon in the forefront of taking on the carbon dioxide, which is affecting and driving global warming. So it's a triple win with Oregon at the forefront. In addition, we can reduce our foreign oil by saying that the oil leases in the Gulf, which are currently long-term leases, and a few companies control a great number of them, change those to use it or lose it leases. So that if the big oil companies decide that they're not going to exercise that lease, then other companies have the chance to bid on those oil leases and be part of that piece of the energy puzzle. And I thank you to Pat for mentioning the electric vehicles. Been partnering with Lamar Alexander on electric vehicles and with Dick Lugar on a broader energy strategy. And you know, Lamar points out that in Tennessee, they have surplus wasted energy at night from nuclear power plants. A huge amount, actually, huge amount of energy unutilized. And as he puts it, he'd like to be able to fill up our tanks with that wasted electrical energy rather than importing oil from overseas. And he also knows, because the Leaf plant is being built in Tennessee, how much the production of electric vehicles can contribute. So these sorts of bipartisan collaborations would be very valuable in taking America forward. Education. Well, it's clear that in this knowledge economy in the world, it is going to be the countries that do the best on education that are going to have the strongest economies down the road. And folks, I think you all know we're not doing very well. Our school children are having shorter hours throughout the year than our competitors around the globe. The cost of going to college as it compares to a regular middle-class salary has gone way up from the time that you and I were in college till now. And that means that we are becoming the first generation of parents whose children are getting less education than we got. That is absolutely unacceptable, and it's why we have to invest in Pell Grants. It's why we have to work to make sure that our K-12 program prepares us well, prepares our children well for higher education. And quite frankly, so many of the growth industries for business in America depend upon math and technology. And that's why in the recent rewrite of the Education Act, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, I championed the STEM strategy. Now STEM, science, technology, education, mathematics. We have to do a lot more so that our children come out of K-12 having a good feel for this. And that doesn't just mean the normal classroom routine of taking a little more algebra and a little more calculus. It means things like robotics competitions. It means things like a seminar that a young lady, her name is Savannah, and Savannah Lohberger, she at Hillsborough High School designed a program called Girls Get It. And it was a summer program for girls in technology, and any one of us would have enjoyed going to it. It had so many creative activities. And she described how they had robots they designed doing flash dances, and how they were electrocuting pickles, and so on and so forth. And the girls who participated had a whole new understanding. We need those types of programs for our sons and our daughters. We don't have right now the Sputnik moment, where everyone says, look what the Soviets have done and we've got to catch up. We have to recognize that we are in a world where we are falling behind on science and technology, that it's unacceptable, and work together to turn that around, or our economy will not lead the world in the next generation. And we have to invest in infrastructure. You know that China is spending 10% of their GDP on infrastructure? When I went to China earlier this year, I rode a bullet train out of Beijing to Tianjin, over 200 miles per hour. And as I traveled the country, I saw light rail projects, railroad freight projects. An enormous amount of infrastructure had occurred in the 14 years since my first trip to China. And it was stunning. But 10% of their GDP is going into that effort. Europe is spending 5% of its GDP. Who would like to volunteer? How much of our GDP are we spending? Anyone want to throw out a number? I hear 1%. Well, I hear 2%. 2% is a general number that in evaluation. 2%. Well, that is barely enough to keep our current infrastructure in repair. So we have to do more on infrastructure. And how about this? How about we end this war in Afghanistan, where we're spending $120 billion a year, and bring that money home and do more nation building here in America? In one of those great, rare, bipartisan moments, the transportation bill came out of the Environment and Public Works Committee I serve on. Senator Boxer and Senator Inhofe and the leadership and the rest of the committee members worked very hard to get that bill out. It will sustain transportation at the 2011 level in 2012. And that may not seem like much of an accomplishment, and it's not enough. But it's in contrast to the bill that was in the House of Representatives that would cut transportation spending by 35%. That bill, the House bill, would mean a loss of 7,000 good-paying middle-class jobs in Oregon, not to mention all the jobs that flow from the expenditures those families make. So the House bill on transportation, completely unacceptable. We have to fight to sustain and, as we work our way through this crisis, expand our investment. It is a key if you're in Eastern Oregon and you're thinking about Highway 97 as a freight corridor, whether you're thinking about port facilities along our coast, whether you're considering the challenge of interchanges that are slowing down freight up through the Willamette Valley, whether we're looking at I think there are only 2 drawbridges left on the interstate system in the United States of America. One of them is across the Columbia, right here in the middle of this key transportation corridor. We have to replace that drawbridge with a modern freight and passenger facilitating structure, the Columbia River crossing. You know, there's a lot of work to be done, and you're all here working to paint the vision and the details. And sometimes it's on the mega end, sometimes on the modest end. You know, a recent issue was Senator Wyden and I have been fighting so that the base in Umatilla is decommissioned in the fashion the community wants, to be the maximum contributor to regional economic development rather than sitting unused or reserved for other purposes. It is essential that the community plan be pushed through, or solving a problem in which Army radar system was obstructing the deployment of wind power. These are the big issues and the small issues. You're here to figure them out, help our state legislature and your federal delegation understand how we can work together to take Oregon forward as a leader in the clean energy economy of the future. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Senator. Really appreciate your remarks and your continued support. Oregon is fortunate indeed to have such a hardworking and effective delegation.